Thank you, everybody, for coming. So for those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Cheryl Ehrman, and I'm the Dean of the Davidson College of Engineering. And today I'm pleased to introduce Maha Ibrahim, partner of the early stage venture capital firm Canaan Partners. Ms. Ibrahim earned her BA in economics and an MA in sociology from Stanford University, just up the road, and a PhD in economics from MIT. Before joining Canaan Partners, she was the Vice President of Business Development for Quest Communications. She currently focuses on enterprise, cloud, and e-commerce, and was one of the first investors to recognize the potential of social gaming. Her current boards include companies innovating fashion and luxury e-commerce, photography, data acquisition, and more. She's a champion and mentor of women in technology and is very passionate about funding and raising the profiles of female founders and entrepreneurs. Ms. Ibrahim is also a trustee for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Once again, it's my pleasure to welcome Maha Ibrahim, partner of the Canaan Partners firm. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say I'm very honored to speak with you today. It's not often that I get to spend time in such a group setting, so thank you for taking the time to listen with me or listen to me today. I'm going to spend the first couple of slides going through an introduction of myself and my firm, and then I'll get into the meat of the presentation, which is really about retail and artificial intelligence and how the two are blending together. I'll spend about 40 minutes on the presentation, and then we can get into Q&A, and you guys can ask me whatever you want. So let me just set the groundwork. I'm a general partner with Canaan Partners. We're an early stage venture fund. I know you guys have heard from venture capitalists before, so I'm not going to belabor the point on what these things mean. Suffice it to say, we're a pretty large early stage fund. We've been in business for 30 years. Hopefully we'll be in business for another 30 years. We focus at the Series A, which is typically 5 people in a business plan. We also sometimes do seed, which might be 2 people in a business plan. And we hopefully get it right more often than we get it wrong. Suffice it to say that we are looking at dislocations in markets, and we're looking for transformational technologies that we think can build into multiple billion-dollar opportunities. And we'll talk about how that is related to retail and AI in subsequent slides. We're also a diversified fund. So about 40% of what we do is healthcare. We have people dedicated to that, and 60% is tech. We're also bi-coastal, so we're East Coast and West Coast. Both of those things are rather unusual in venture capital, as we tend to be an apprenticeship business. It tends to be working very, very closely with entrepreneurs. But we've been doing this for 30 years, and it works well for us. The $800 million fund is fairly large for an early vintage. We'll be investing this over the next 3 years, and hopefully in another 3 years we'll be raising a fund of equal size. We've had a lot of successes over the last several years. As you can see here, we raise money so that we can hopefully triple it. We're raising $800 million so that we can eventually give back, hopefully, $2.4 billion to the people who give us the money. And as you can see, we've been really successful, not on the back of 1 or 2 exits, but really on the back of several, both in healthcare and in tech. And the model for us has been a real franchise approach towards investing. So we are not a firm that goes very wide in a multitude of areas. We tend to pick an area and go very deep there and maybe do 15 deals in it, get to know all of the executives and entrepreneurs, develop a thesis around it, and really prosecute deals within a certain sector and raise our visibility within that sector, as opposed to raising the visibility of the fund broadly. That is the strategy. This is me. I've been with Canaan for 18 years. As Cheryl said, I wanted to be a professor, so I have a PhD in economics, and I was well on the way to becoming a professor until I realized that it's a pretty solitary lifestyle, no offense to anybody here, and it wasn't really something that I was suited for at that point in my life. It's probably something that I'll do later on in life, but I felt like I wanted to do something that involved a little more interaction with folks like yourself. So after graduating MIT, I went to BCG for 7 months, Boston Consulting Group. And this was in the late 90s when everything was crazy with technology, much like it is now in the Valley. And from that purview, I said, gosh, I want to also be doing something more. And there's these cool startups out there, and I want to join them and see what's going on. So I did. And I joined an upstart telecommunications company called Quest Communications, which was out of Denver. They, at that point, had about 1,000 people. I was their first business development hire. I knew nothing about telecommunications. I knew how to answer a phone, and that was about it. And I learned on the job really, really quickly. So my main job was to interface with the startups in Silicon Valley. And those startups were venture-backed. And the role of those startups were either to help us build out our network at Quest, because we were a telecommunications company, or it was to highlight with content the capabilities of the network. All of those companies that I was working with were venture-backed startups. And through that, I got a lens into what then became my career. So I shortly thereafter jumped into venture, where I have been for the last 18 years. When I joined venture capital, it was the peak of the market. And within about a week of me joining, we entered nuclear winter in the Valley for about the next 4 years. Every startup was failing, nothing was working. All of the money that was put into companies in the late 90s that didn't exit, that didn't sell, that didn't go public in that time frame basically died. So I spent the first 3-4 years of my career really learning about what entrepreneurial failure looked like. And as such, it's helped me a lot I feel like it's helped me a lot in my ability to empathize and have constructive dialogue, and frankly, dispassionate dialogue with entrepreneurs about what's working and what's not working, because there's an opportunity cost to all of this. So fast forward 18 years later, I am with the same firm. I'm a general partner, and focus in 2 main areas. I focus, because of the Quest Communications background, I focus on infrastructure software, so data center stuff, much of the stuff that a lot of you guys are probably looking into and working on, virtualization, storage, et cetera. That's my jam. I love it. But then I also have a consumer piece to my investment strategy. And I've done a number of consumer deals, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how my thoughts on those consumer deals have really led to where we're looking at dislocations in the market right now. So Canaan has invested in a number of what we call D2C brands. So those are direct-to-consumer brands. Those are companies that are here, and you guys have you guys ever used Instacart? It's a grocery delivery company. This is a dog food company. These are brands that are just starting up. These are brands that are saying, all of the people in this room don't buy the way that I bought 20 years ago or that I buy today. And how you buy is going to inform how retail is shaped for the next 5, 10, 20 years. And so over the last 5 years, you've really seen an increase in the level of venture-backed direct-to-consumer brands, largely because the folks in this room and folks like you all across the country are buying in a different way. They have a different relationship with their brands than they ever had before, and also have a very different relationship to the retailer. So with all of these, and with that in mind, we've also invested in a number of what we call enabling technologies. So what is helping you as a consumer understand the brands better? What is helping the brands and the retailers understand you better and get product to you that you want to buy and that speaks to you? Because again, inherently, the millennial, I'll call you millennials, even though you might be Gen whatever. I don't know what the next gen is going to be. I'm Gen... What am I? Gen X, maybe? I have no idea. I'm old. But nevertheless, all of these companies are being built on the backs of the thought that you as a consumer, the people in their late teens, 20s, 30s, are going to buy in a different way. And from that, you're going to have more conversational interactions with these brands and retailers, either through point of sale or through different search products or through different bots than I ever did when I was your age. So where does this fit in artificial intelligence? So artificial intelligence, as some people say, is like electricity. And about 10 years ago, when the iPhone was coming out, everyone in my industry was saying, let's invest in mobile, let's invest in mobile. Today, mobile is saying, like, let's invest in the web. It just is what it is. You don't invest in mobile. You invest on the apps on top of mobile. And the same goes for artificial intelligence. We're not investing in basic horizontal artificial intelligence plays, because that exists with TensorFlow. It exists with various open source solutions. It exists out there already, not necessarily in a venture-backed way. Where we think there's going to be importance is looking at the specific applications of verticalized artificial intelligence onto large markets. In this case, what we'll be talking about today is retail. So let's take Cheerios, for example. This is a box of Cheerios that 50 years ago was made in a factory and delivered to you on a truck, et cetera. Today, the same thing happens, right? But through technology, everything is changing. Everything's getting more efficient. Everything is getting cheaper. So the the tractors, if you can see this, they're all managed via artificial intelligence. The warehouses are all managed via robots with artificial intelligence. When you, as a consumer, go into the store, you have the ability to price shop that box of Cheerios based on artificial intelligence that the store is providing. So all of this is coming together in a way that is incredibly disruptive to industries, and in this case, the retail and grocery channel. So as we look at artificial intelligence, we're thinking of all of these things. So artificial intelligence is a confluence, and again, I'm speaking to the choir right now, so I'm not going to go deep in it because I'm assuming you guys are all very sophisticated here, of big data, of what we used to look at 20 years ago as regression analysis, data optimization, predictive analysis, et cetera. And all of this, because of the massive scale of data that we didn't have 20 years ago when I was doing all of this stuff, is a completely new world and allows us as venture capitalists, but more so you as engineers, to develop products that are so much more tailored for the consumer experience or the warehouse or the factory than we've ever seen before, hopefully yielding a bunch of efficiencies. So what does all this mean? So what we've seen is this rise of artificial intelligence and this rise of efficiencies on the product side. And at the same time, there's been kind of this perfect storm where, again, people in this room, they're no longer walking into stores. Your user experience is no longer a many-to-one of this room to a Macy's or this room to a Safeway, the way it was 20 years ago. Things are changing. And a whole lot of companies who frankly haven't adapted or couldn't adapt have been left behind. And I know you guys have been, I'm sure you see a number of familiar logos here, but these are all companies that are either dead or dying, and probably will be a lot smaller in 5 years than they are today. At the same time, we know that all of you folks and myself aren't walking into the stores anymore. So how are stores reacting to this? We know that stores are now, retailers, are using artificial intelligence to really combat this. How do I get to you as a customer when I know that you may not want my product anymore? How do I get to you in a more intelligent way and develop a relationship with you where you want to buy what I have to sell? This is another graph, which I love, of the store closures in 2017. Name after name after name. You walk into a mall of 10 years ago, it looks vastly different than the mall of today. right? The mall of 10 years ago had Radio Shack. It had Sears and Kmart. It had Gymboree. It had The Limited. All of those companies have been crushed by the wave of all of you and me going on our mobile device or going on our web and finding either an Amazon-like experience or finding an experience that is direct to a D2C brand, a direct-to-consumer brand, that we really feel speaks to us. This is 2018. So this is a graph for the last 2 months. So one could argue it's not getting better, it's getting worse. How many of you have been to a mall recently? Right, it says a lot. And when you probably were in that mall, I'm guessing you were there for a restaurant or an Apple store, but probably not going to, the traditional Nordstrom or the traditional Macy's. The mall is going to look a lot different in 5 years, or even today, than when I was your age. So what are the consistent causes of death? Brands. So again, those old brands that I bought are no longer relevant to you. And that can be solved through acquisition. So if I am these big retailers, I can start acquiring these direct-to-consumer brands. That is one of the reasons that venture capital is being poured into the direct-to-consumer brands. I can buy that. I can buy my way out of that. But all of these other reasons are ones, with the exception of this one, which is mostly real estate related. All of these other reasons I can try to solve through getting smarter. I can try to solve with the massive amount of data that I have in my data centers and start developing that relationship with the consumer that the consumer is wanting. I can start looking at what's the cause of my high returns and say, okay, if pants are the things that are being returned all the time, maybe I don't want to sell them anymore. Maybe I only want to sell a certain SKU in a certain region during Christmas or during the winter. Maybe I don't want to be selling earmuffs in Los Angeles in January because I don't need them. Heretofore, retailers really didn't have that level of specificity to be able to be nimble and agile. And that's one of the reasons they're hurting so badly. So I don't think that any of this is new to you, but I will say this. One of the ways that these new direct-to-consumer brands are competing so well against the larger brands in every single vertical is this. The new consumer brands are taking all of the knowledge that they're developing via their website, via their mobile app, via their social channels. They're taking all of that data and buying in short, small increments where they don't have to hold as much inventory, where they can do kind of rapid testing of products and push and pull products into the market in a way that a Macy's buyer couldn't. The old retail channels, the old product channels, were sometimes 6 months to a year in length. We have companies in the D2C space that can get product to market, fashion products, in a month. It's incredibly hard to compete with that. But they're able to do that not because they're small, but because they're smart. Because they're using data, they're using customer feedback to really understand what the customer wants before putting it to market, as opposed to putting it to market and just hoping that the customer sees and wants what you have to sell. Moreover, the relationship with the consumer is changing in many ways because of this. And this is more product related, but you as a consumer group, me as a consumer group, we're not wanting a bunch of, excuse my language, cheap shit from Asia anymore. We really are looking for sustainability. It's less about pump and dump products. It's more about fewer, better things. So retail is reacting to all of this, big retail, with all of these store closures, are reacting to this with this slide. This is a slide of all of the AI-related companies that are targeting retail right now. Massive. And as you can see here, it's everything from AR tools. So if I'm in a dressing room, what am I going to look like with that dress on without trying it on? To inventory management. If I have 50 stores around the country, how do I best move inventory in one way or the other? In a way where I'm not going to have overstock situations or liquidation issues. Sizing and styling, which I think is obvious. Visual search. If I go on a site, particularly a marketplace, and I search for blue dress, or I see one of you and I say, I want that purple shirt. I want to take a picture of it. I want the options immediately. I don't want that search experience to be cumbersome and difficult. All of this is meant to make that retail channel smarter and get product to us that we want to buy and have that experience be as curated and as personal and customized as it could ever be. I love this slide. So what are retailers doing to combat all of this? I was in Union Square recently in San Francisco. Dyson, the vacuum cleaner company, you guys know what I'm talking about? They have a flagship store in Union Square now that they just opened up. I'm thinking, gosh, why does a vacuum store need a flagship store in Union Square? How many people need vacuums? How often? I wasn't getting it. So I walked in, and it turns out Dyson is now selling a $500 hairdryer. But people aren't going to walk into a store and get a $500 hairdryer, right? They're just not. They might even get it on Amazon, but you're not going to get that foot traffic. You're not going to get people who are running to Dyson to get that hairdryer. What was amazing to me was was a company that I knew as a vacuum cleaner. In the very back of the store had like a blowout set of seats. So they were actually using their real estate to drive traffic for that experience, to show consumers that they can straighten their hair with these blow dryers. And that never would have happened 5 years ago. You never would have had a store that was selling hardware actually be driving services in their store. And it was emblematic to me of exactly what we were talking about before, that the relationship with the consumer is much more personal. Brands want it to be much more personal and engaging than just, I am selling you a product. And if you go into Lululemon, you see that they have yoga classes. If you go into Sur La Table, they have cooking classes. If you go into a mall, your mall looks like it's a potpourri of experiences now. It's not just product, product, product. So that's one way retail is combating all of this. Another thing, and I mentioned this before, is acquisitions. Gosh, if I have brands that people don't want to buy, if I'm not getting the demographic that I want that's in this room basically, then I'll just go ahead and buy the brands that I know people are going to want. And so on this slide, you see Walmart's acquisitions over the last several years. Jet.com is an online Costco, basically. ShoeBuy is it's obviously a shoe and apparel company. Bonobos is a pant company. So they felt that men were going to that D2C brand to buy office pants where the slogan was, it makes your butt look nice or something like that, right? Walmart wanted didn't necessarily want that product. Walmart cared much less about that product. They cared more about that customer. How do I get that customer coming into thinking about Walmart as a hipper brand? How do I get that customer who pays probably 5 times more for that pair of pants than they would for a pair of pants walking into Walmart? How do I get that customer affiliated with my brand? And so all of them are thinking about this. So how are they solving the problem? When you walk into a store now, and this is still in its infancy, right? But when you walk into a store now, retailers want to make it so that your relationship with them is truly omni-channel. They are using technology to understand where you are. If you walk into a store, who you are, have you been to this store before, what have you bought, and what have you returned? And what do I suggest that I buy, that you're going to buy again? And what's your sizing? The retailers, when you are walking into a store, want to know everything about you, want to know your relationship with that brand from the beginning of time so that they can best fit your needs going forward. One could argue that it's a massive invasion of privacy, but it's their way of staying relevant. On the back end, and this is where we're spending a lot of time right now, we're seeing a lot of very, very interesting new technologies being built. From distribution centers and robotics, which are mainly based on AI and hardware innovations, to inventory optimization. So how do I pick, pack, and ship not from a distribution center, but from a local store? If I know that that piece of inventory is not in the distribution center in Illinois, but is in a store that is 30 miles away from the customer, I can save massively in shipping charges by shipping out of that store. And that may sound like it's not a lot, like it's nickel and dime, but retail is on such a small margin that those nickels and dimes actually add up tremendously. And lastly, customer service. Every direct-to-consumer brand that we see right now has implemented some level of chatbot interface, either, again, via social, via their own app, via messaging app, in order to get to you, the way you want to be gotten to. And they are using their back-end data, again, to understand who you are the minute you connect with me as a brand, so that I can serve up information that's not relevant to 100 people, but relevant to you or the 10 people that may have your demographic. So it's all about getting smarter. This is where, in large part, venture is spending the bulk of its time right now when it's looking at retail disruption. Moreover, we're thinking about this. How do I better personalize the products? How do I, if you're going to come to me, make sure that you get a product that fits? In apparel, there's about a 25 to 35% return rate. That is a massive hit to any store's economic viability. If I can in some way understand your shape, your size, what you like, then I can reduce, even if I can reduce that by a few points, it's a massive win for a company. Personalized pricing, which in my old academic world we used to call discriminatory pricing, we're going to start seeing more of this, where consumers are offering you a much better deal than they may be offering you, or excuse me, retailers will be. And then targeted marketing. I was speaking to a company that is about 50 years old, and I was surprised that this 50-year-old company with 50 stores nationwide selling health food is using these targeted promotions, is so sophisticated already because they don't want to be left behind by the Amazons of the world, et cetera, that they're using these targeted promotions via text to get you to walk in my door. And that promotion that I offer you, again, is going to be based on what you've bought before. And the promotion that I offer you, if you're a new customer, might be based on your socioeconomic or your demographic information that I have. So it's all very data-driven. This is Walmart right now. Walmart is going to look a lot different in 5 years from now. I think they're going to look to build smaller, more tailored stores. As it stands today, if you enter a Walmart, if you want the good, if you order online and want the goods served up to you curbside, they'll do it. They're looking at they're looking at VR. They're looking at ways that you can understand potentially how a couch will look in your living room. They're looking at ways of scanning prices so that they don't have to have that person walking up and down the hall, walking up and down the aisles all the time, changing the prices based on what the manager says. They're doing it automatically. And again, the curbside pickup, it's huge. All responding not only to the threat from Amazon, but also to the general threat of personalization. I think I'm good there. And this one. This is the last slide, so then we'll go to question and answer. I always think it takes about 10 years to build a successful company. And sometimes you get supernovas that just kind of come out of nowhere, and within 2 to 3 years are just massive. But businesses are hard to build. They take a long time. What has surprised me is how quickly all of this has happened. All of the transition from offline to online to ultimately omni-channel has happened. So we're an investor in Instacart. When they came in about 5 years ago, it was a founder and an idea. And as of today, that business is valued at $4 billion. It services over 150 chains. Customers are moving in that direction because of the immediacy, because it is easy, because of the value it provides. If you can capture that customer, it is amazing to me how much faster things are moving now. And then imagine if you're Walmart, imagine if you're Target, and you're seeing that. They're scared. They're having to react. And those dislocations are ultimately what keeps me as a VC in business. All right, I'm done. So let's go for Q&A. Great.
Can you explain a bit more about how the personalized pricing concept?
Sure. Yeah, happy to.
Can you explain a bit more about how the personalized pricing concept works? Or give an example. Give an example.
Absolutely. So I think the best way to describe that is on the promotion side, since that's the easiest. There are companies now that are saying to you, I know who you are when you walk in the door because I know your Wi-Fi signal, and you've opted in to receive specials from me or promotions from me. And I know also because of that what you've bought. I know your history. I know that you like gray socks, and I know that you only buy shorts in the summertime, and I know that you only buy red shorts. I may send you some sort of promotion based on your buying behavior that I necessarily wouldn't send you because you may have a completely different buying pattern. So I'm trying to get you in the door. I'm trying to get you in the door repeatedly. So you can think about different promotions that are customized for different people.
Hi, I have 2 questions.
Please.
The first one is, how does someone get a meeting with you and your partners?
Yes.
Is it by email or phone? And second, is there something particular that you look for in a pitch that would compel you guys to invest in that company?
I'm asked the last question quite a bit, so let me target that first, and then I'll get to the first question. Every venture capitalist is different. For me, what matters most, and this is assuming that the team is credible. So that's table stakes, that the team is credible. Assuming that the team is credible, what matters to me the most, and where we lose money the most, is market size and market timing. We're early stage investors. So again, you walk in with 3 other founders, you may have an idea, you may have a prototype, but you really haven't had that go-to-market traction or time under your belt. So I am making an educated guess on how quickly that market will evolve and how big that market will be, how disruptive your technology will be, how much value you are able to capture of that market. So by and large, what I'm looking for is an area that I know enough about, and an area where I think you can create a multiple billion-dollar opportunity where the headwinds are overcomable. So the first question was around how do you get a meeting? Typically, we see deals that we actually proactively pursue. So as a fund, as I mentioned before, we kind of take a franchise approach towards investing, so we're thesis-driven. I may be looking in storage virtualization for a 3-month period. I'll seek you out. I'll talk with executives at VMware. I'll talk with executives at other companies. And through that network, I may find you. I may be lucky enough to find you. That is ideal. In a lot of cases, deals, and this is early stage, late stage is completely different. A lot of cases, you will know somebody that I know, and that person refers you to me. So it's usually referral based. I prefer it to be me reaching out to you. Again, every VC is different, and it clearly depends on what stage you are. Does that help? Great. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I've noticed personally that a side effect of all this online shopping is cardboard boxes.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there are solutions out there, and if that's somewhere on your amazing slide of companies, is someone out there providing solutions?
That's a really tough question because I agree with you. I mean, it is a problem. It is unfortunately not a problem that we perceive as valuable enough to target in a big way right now. That will change. I know that will change. We are seeing different packaging methods, but the packaging space in particular is very, very low margin, very, very high volume. Those aren't necessarily venture-backed types of deals. We prefer companies that can scale based on a sizable gross margin. Hopefully that answers your question. But I agree with you, that is a big problem.
Other questions?
Please. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
So my question is that could you please explain once again how do you define AI?
Sure. I think of how many of you guys would say that you are working in artificial intelligence right now? Okay. I would assume that if I polled the folks that did raise their hand, they would have a completely different answer than the other one, than to me. So I will give you the high level, and then the specifics, I think, are very vertically focused. So if you're dealing with AI in the autonomous vehicle space, it might be very different than an application in retail, might be very different than an application in enterprise software. But ultimately, it is the use of data, and in this case, the use of big data to inform and predict decisions in the future based on the information that you've received in the past. What makes these past couple of years, so interesting in artificial intelligence, is the volume of data that has been created, but also the compute power, and frankly, the cloud, but mainly compute power that we've seen.
Okay, I have one more question.
Please.
So, like you said that there was like those pricing machines.
Yes.
So, aren't those like taking away jobs though?
Yes. So that's a more political question, but I think the general sentiment is there a fear that technology creates such a dislocation in the employment market that jobs are basically erased? And yes, that will happen, without a doubt. And that just means that institutions like this, and in particular institutions like this that maybe aren't in Silicon Valley, but maybe in the middle of the country, are more and more important. This is my view, Maha. Somebody else may have a completely different view because this is more of a political statement. But we have got to find a way of educating laborers who may be unskilled in more skill-based jobs going forward, or else they will be left behind. Trucking is the largest employer in this country. And within a 10 to 20 year time frame, you may see autonomously driven trucks. What happens then? Yes?
I understand that you also invest in the fashion industry.
Yes.
Could you comment on that a little bit?
Specifically?
No, for example, in general, how the fashion industry can benefit from these technologies.
So that's a big question. I'll maybe answer it in my specific universe. I'll give you an example of some of our portfolio companies. One of them is a company called Kuyana, which we invested in about 5 years ago as a seed deal. They were are selling very well apparel and accessories to the millennial and 30-something generation, all based on social commerce. So their way of getting to the folks in this room was not through your traditional billboard, was not through your traditional, 5-page spread in Vogue magazine. It was all through using influencer channels, blog channels, where the customers were, to get them to develop a relationship with that brand that wasn't a glossy picture on a billboard. So we're looking at companies that are, yes, using technology on the back end, but as importantly, using technology on the front end to develop that one-to-one relationship with the customer. It is incredibly important. I'm also in a company called The Real Real, which is a very large luxury consignment company. And their use of technology is definitely on the front end because they have so many customers, but their business model is one SKU, one item. So it is a consignment store where if I take a handbag out of your closet and I take the same handbag, out of your closet, those handbags may be the exact same brand and type, but they're a different product. One may have a scratch on it, one might not. One might be missing a latch and one might not. So how I deal with one SKU, one item is incredibly difficult when you're talking about items in the millions. And it's all about the use of big data to hopefully understand and make that sorting out process a lot easier. Because as you can imagine, identifying the scratch, the bag that had a scratch versus one that didn't have a scratch is pretty difficult and time consuming if you're not using technology. Please.
So when you talked about specifically targeting audiences, most companies have, really easy access to targeting specific audiences.
Yes.
And so one of the things that I see most commonly is that when I get targeted, and it's not even something that I searched, I typically shy away from it, and that's becoming more and more of a problem. So how do you view that?
I think that's a huge challenge going forward. And we're certainly seeing the backlash of social media targeting these days politically. I mean, it is encompassed the political discourse in this country, where you have seen targeting based on political notions. And yes, that has existed in e-commerce as well. The problem is, though, it's been incredibly effective. And it's not shown any slowing down. So once it does, then we'll think of something else. But right now, that targeting it's gold. The issue then becomes, I can find a batch of customers through that targeting that may resonate with my brand aesthetic. What happens with scale? How do I reach that broader audience? I can get those early adopters through targeting, but how do I get to mass appeal? And that's where, through marketing efforts, you have to think a lot differently than the early days. It really do have to think about mass market adoption. So many companies, when they go beyond targeting, are doing, your old traditional TV ads, radio ads, et cetera. And so if you guys are listening to the radio now, you're seeing, or watching TV, there are many more traditional, or there are many more D2C companies, those all new crop of brands, advertising in a way that they haven't been for a really long time. Yeah.
How do you view influencer marketing?
Influencer marketing. So he asked how I view influencer marketing. Again, incredibly effective, particularly with people who have held themselves up as kind of experts in the field, who are traditional bloggers, for instance. But again, that has shown no slowing down. And then that there's a ripple effect into politics, obviously, with influencer marketing, because basically what happened in the last political campaign was exactly that. It was somebody who was deemed an influencer who was then allowed to spread, fake news, if you will. So I believe you will see some sort of contraction in a lot of the ways that social channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, et cetera, are allowing for influencer marketing in the future. Does that help? Okay.
These are all really great questions. Do we have others?
Please.
So there's a lot of engineers in this room.
Yes.
And so I'm sure when you find a team that you are willing to have a meeting with, there's engineers playing roles on many or most of those teams. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you can share what you see as maybe the top 2 or 3 business skills an entrepreneurial engineer might pick up to aid them in that process.
Yes. So I don't have the number with me, but you'd be surprised at how many of our CEOs are engineers. So aren't coming from traditional marketing or sales backgrounds where they're outward focused, but have gone through engineering, product, and then eventually marketing roles. Where I see the trajectory typically is when an engineer starts out as an engineer, moves into product, and is really able to touch that customer in a richer way than just in my day-to-day coding or DevOps world. And some engineers really thrive when they get that flavor of product, where they get that mix of tech and customer feedback. And then that launches them into very strong executive roles because they're able to see the balance of technology and resources and expense on that side, so the R&D, and how that affects sales. So we find that the more technical CEOs can be incredibly successful because they're able to manage both sides of the house effectively.
Any other questions? No. All right, how about we just thank our speakers?
Thank you.